Hi, thank you for being brave enough to open up this video of many people's least favourite topic in English, namely poetry. So, welcome to this YouTube presentation about how to study poetry based on this study skills book. No, don't press that button to move on to something even more exciting. Just spare me a moment to see if I can persuade you that poetry is fascinating, challenging, yes, but also hugely rewarding if you dedicate a little time to getting on terms with it. Even if you don't like it, I can give you the tools to analyse it for classwork and exam purposes. All the techniques I describe will help you make huge strides in nailing that difficult exercise, unseen poems, which features so strongly in English courses nowadays. My book, taking these ideas further, is under production. Now then, I suspect many of you will regard poetry as hopelessly old-fashioned, irrelevant, elitist and interesting only to an exclusive band of fuddy-duddies who have nothing better to do. Just like this little number from Shakespeare, which would have most of you rushing off to the nearest Xbox to seek proper entertainment. We'll return to this poem a little later, but let's examine the argument that poetry does not figure in everyday life. Isn't the vocal part of the music you listen to, with its rhythms and lyrics which tend to rhyme, poetry of a kind? You may be present at a rock concert with all the noise and enthusiasm that creates, or just playing at home with a brother or sister or friend. Many people nowadays carry their sounds with them, and if you're a churchgoer, music is always present. Finally, if you're on the road, there's music in the car. That's not your vehicle, by the way, is it? If so, please move it, as it's blocking the car park. Much of current popular music is about love and its joys and tribulations. And with the music and rhythm come lyrics in verse, text that rhymes. Sometimes very simple stuff like moon and June, and others quite complex, one of the masters of which is Bob Dylan. Let's take a handful of words from his song Hey Mr. Tambourine Man. To dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free. That's sheer poetry which anyone can relate to. So, let's dig a little deeper and find out more what this poetry stuff is all about. So, to begin with, we start with the shape of the poem, for which I need a desert island and a helicopter. Those will help me explain what I'm talking about. Imagine you're flying in your helicopter as you do, over a sun-kissed beach on one of your regular sun-kissed holidays. Hopefully with a full tank of aviation spirit and the appropriate pilot's license. In the distance there's a cruise ship which cruises further into the blue horizon. Down below on that idyllic island, the deck chairs have emptied as two guests saunter off for a swim well away from the sharks. If you look closely, you'll see a pair of deck chairs side by side with books abandoned by their readers. One of them has been reading a novel, the other poetry. Too far away to read the actual words, but let's see if we can make out which is which. You pause in your flight to take a swift photo of the two books and move on. And back at the apartment, you take a peek at the images you've acquired. On the horizon, one less cruise ship to pollute the environment. By the way, no cruise ship passengers were hurt in the making of this video. Meanwhile, our swimmers are frantically moving away from the sharks back to to the shore. Right, this is what your pictures look like, which we took from the helicopter. On the right-hand side is the opening page of Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. On the other is the whole of the poem I showed you Shakespeare struggling with a few moments ago. Now here's a question for the wannabe Sherlock Holmes detectives among you. How can you tell which is which? Brief pause for thought. Now we've closed in on them, so let's still take no heed of what the words mean, and I hope one difference between poetry and prose leaps out and grabs your attention. The novel is printed fully justified, in other words, with smooth margins on either side. Poetry, on the other hand, has a ragged right, with each line a different length from the others. So the physical form of poetry is different from that of prose, emphasizing the significance of each individual line. Now, I want you to continue to look at the poem as if it was just a blob of text on the page. Examine the poem and its punctuation. First question. How many lines are there? Answer, 14. More about that in a second. And question 2, what about the punctuation? Again, you may notice that the first line is an introductory question. Next load of lines run on, all in the same sentence, coming to a temporary pause with a colon, as if to say, hey, there's something important coming up, so pay attention. And those last 2 lines presumably offer some kind of answer to the question. Well, we'll see. Let's put all these clues together and see what we can make of it. The poem is all in one verse, or stanza to give it its Sunday name. Starts off posing a question, and it explores that question for the bulk of the poem, probably offering an answer or some kind of statement in response to the question in the last 2 lines. Now, this particular poetic form is one that's been popular over the centuries, and it's called a sonnet. It's different from many other types of poetry, as a sonnet, like this one before us, typically does pose a question, analyses it, and provides at the end some kind of response. This is your standard Shakespearean sonnet. Others have slightly different formats. So, we've learned quite a lot by a swift look at the external appearance of the poem and the punctuation. Well, where do we go from here? What we need is a systematic approach to unlocking the other secrets of the poem. So, here's an apparently odd way of doing it. In order to do that, we must take a look at what Moses has been up to in the Old Testament. Now, bear with me, it will make sense. Here is Moses with his original 10 commandments. Negotiations have been going on all day to reduce the number of commandments, and Moses' feet are getting tired, traipsing up and down the mountain. Finally, he's able to report to his followers, there's good news and there's bad news already. Good news, I've got them down to 10. Bad news, adultery is still in. For those sad folk who need to know, that was a joke. Now, I've cooked up my own list of commandments for helping you to analyse poetry, but there are big differences between them and those in the Old Testament. If you take a look at the Old Testament commandments first, they are all compulsory, ending with number 10, thou shalt not covet. Covet's an old-fashioned word meaning to be envious, lustful of. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's iPhone 12, for example. The second difference is that most of them are of the thou shalt not variety, telling you what not to do. And the third is that there are 10 of them. Moses had 10, I offer 12. Moses are all must-dos and don'ts. Mine, with the exception of number 12, are optional. More about that later. Sharp eye among you will notice immediately that all these are topic headings. None of them tell you what not to do. And secondly, let me repeat that they are not compulsory. I managed to get them down to 12, so Moses beat me by 2. Now, here's an important point coming up. The reason why my commandments, except 12 of course, are all optional rather than rigidly compulsory. Analysing poetry is not, repeat, not, like examining a bug under a microscope, where an insect always has 6 legs, unless some naughty child in the class has pulled some of the legs off. Or arithmetic as here, which I am reliably informed, for example, that 2 plus 2 always equals 4. No more, no less. So the rule is clear and rigid. X plus y equals, and the outcome is always the sum of x and y. In analysing a poem, on the other hand, flexibility is the name of the game. It's a kind of dialogue between you and the poem, trying out various items on the list of commandments to see which ones work. Like a sort of jigsaw puzzle, where the pieces vary from one jigsaw to the next, and one poem to the next. If you aren't a fan of poetry, that doesn't mean that you cannot learn how to systematically analyse a poem and write up your conclusions about it for classwork or exams. And my commandments will help you to do just that. So that's episode 1 wrapped up, dealing with the physical appearance of the poem, including punctuation. And I look forward to seeing you on the second episode, which will be about vocabulary and making a start on imagery. Thank you for watching if you have been. See you next time.